Meeting, get started. Welcome to the January 9th, 2023 meeting of the IMU Board of Trustees of the Electric, Water, and Communication Utilities. Jackie, will you do a roll call, please?
Board Member Selgrade? White? Smith?
Present.
Braska?
Yes. Yes.
At this time, I'd entertain any public comment. If you'd step to the podium and state your name and address. One here for public comment. Moving to consent agenda. We'll look at all three items and then we'll approve. Approval of the claims that were sent for December 30th. Questions or comments? About the financial report. Do you want to speak to it?
And I know you know we've got this new format, and I think one of the things that's really interesting is probably nowhere in America, other than your group, which is very important, would keep the days of cash on hand. I just can't imagine. I know the reason for it is the A- bond rating, in the future. But so that's really kind of interesting, and that's really great information. This thing is kind of set up for an accountant like me because you get to compare the budget actual in the previous year and the actual, and obviously the important things are probably revenues more than 42% and expenses less than 42%, which means you're above budget in revenues and less than budgets and expenses. And I think pretty much I saw that throughout. I happen to be a believer that fund balances are the foundation of an organization, and you've got very, very strong fund balances. I did with Chris just for a second, kind of the kilowatts being down 3.2% for the 5-month period is, I just wouldn't assume that with a community that's growing like we are, and I know the residential has got additional, maybe not like some of the other cities in the county, but you really not very much. I've been a part of the fiber thing, and when originally, I can't remember, did we borrow 16 million or whatever that was?
Something like that,
To start this whole thing. And I was kind of a conservative accountant. I was kind of leery that this would work out, and apparently you're ahead of your subscriptions, so yeah, you're just doing great. One of the things, and Chris pointed out to me, but one of the things I need to do is probably, Chris Longer sent me the audited financial statement, so I tried to tie the beginning balances out. I haven't been able to do that yet, but I'll probably get with Robert Indris. Isn't he he do the audit? Yeah, and I'll get with Robert, get that figured out, and it's probably just fine. I tried to go back to that audited financial statement, tie the beginning balances out. That's just something, that's just me. Yeah, great information, and yeah, that'd be my comments.
Chris Longer, Chris D, any additional comment? Questions on their?
The only thing I was gonna ask is you make a comment to this effect on the capital spending, but seems like we're really low in all three utilities on the capital side of things. Is that just timing of those projects and not having payments come due, or?
Yeah, I mean, seasonality, we did have a light year last year because of supply chains, and, we really haven't hit our prime where kind of all that stuff hits right in the first couple of months. All those construction projects happen as soon as winter relieves. And so we do, kind of get out on it a little bit. That spending, settles down and stays flat for a couple of months, and it'll spike up towards the end, and we're hoping to land near where we expected, but seasonality really.
Great, thank you. Any conversation or comments on the minutes from the last meeting? If not, I would take a first and second motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. electric utility items.
Yep, the contract bond, we received that back from Tech to do turbine controls, so that's just formality at this point. Board approved, that's all in line.
Nothing that you'd call our attention to.
No.
And I need a first and second motion to approve the resolution approving a contract and bond for the turbine 8 control replacement project.
So moved.
Second.
Jackie, we take roll call, please?
Board Member Smith? Braska?
Yes.
Voigt?
Yes.
Celebrate.
Yes.
Motion approved. Any other electric utility items?
What's timing on that, Mike?
So the one thing was we were waiting we ordered a piece of equipment early this last year because we thought it was gonna take 2 years to get.
And it
showed
did.
up last month. Which was good, that was our always concern, I think.
It came with a discount.
Well, kind of. Yeah, we're on schedule. We'll notify them tomorrow. They'll start ordering all their material. They say everything will be in line and we should be good to go.
And so we would start when?
So as soon as we start, it'd be October.
Okay.
Yep.
How long to complete?
It's about a 2-week process is all, but they've
Oh,
got.
not very long.
No, that's what it's, yeah, start to finish should be about a couple weeks is what they're allowing for.
Thank you.
Yep. So other items, we did get called, to generate on, December 23rd. That's when we had all that really cold weather. MISO area wasn't necessarily in dire straits, but some other territories around were getting concerned about having enough capacity, so they did call us to generate. We only had to generate about an hour and a half. It's about it, got it started up, warmed up, and shut it down, so.
How do you determine when to start and when to stop? Somebody call you and tell you?
Yep, they'll notify us and then they'll call us, and anytime before we ever, they may tell us like, hey, well, actually it started out, they wanted us to generate, I think, for 3 hours. We were gonna generate and they called us to go ahead and get offline. But if we hit that 3 hours, we typically call to verify, are you sure you want us to come off? Because we don't wanna shut it off to turn around and bring it back up.
What did it do to our fuel, Mike?
Oh, I don't know, we didn't, 2,000, 3,000 some gallon is what we burned. They'll pay us for the fuel that we burn on our average fuel cost in the tank.
Just
On the wrong
paid.
side of
Yeah.
So the other thing is, just working on maintenance. We did update, all the lights in the customer service center here this last month.
Big difference.
Yeah, it's LED to LED, so definitely help that. And then we had last week, you may have seen the lights blink at your house possibly, maybe not. We did lose a transmission 69 kV terminator, which is our underground high voltage cable that terminates to be able to go to overhead or whatever. May be the case, but this one was to our substation. It failed and took the power out. Nobody ended up losing power, but we lost our feed from Patterson going towards Winterset. We're still that way today. We've been on the phone for 3 days trying to source parts and figure out how we'll get this. And the reason behind that is, like these terminators, they got a 2-year shelf life and they're expensive. So nobody keeps them sitting around on a shelf to wait for one to fail. But we got closer today. I think, talking with 3M factory that they can possibly get one turnaround to us possibly in a week. Some of them they're talking like 8 weeks, so to get some stuff turned around.
When did you say that happened?
That happened on Wednesday of last week, about probably 7:30. We were back, you were done. Yeah, we were done by 8:30.
I just know there was a big territory south and west of here that was without power. It wouldn't have been related.
No, not ours. Everything operated as it should and transferred power over like it should.
From a practical perspective, what does that mean to us, Mike, not having that?
So we're radio fed right now. From the DPS, from Mid-American, we're all being fed, Mid-American included in us. So we're being fed from one direction, not two. We've got the third feed, but unfortunately, we call the Sipco feed, which goes south on R-63 to the White Oak. The problem is they're pulling so much load down there that if we lose the feed going to Des Moines, we would go in a brownout because they don't have enough capacity come from the south to feed them and us. So we actually shut them off. It's already off, so for whatever reason, if we lose this, it doesn't put us in that situation. Ultimately, if we do lose that, then we go in the dark until we fix it or start the generator up.
So I assume we've done just a once over of our current live feed just to make sure everything's looking good in there, nothing.
Yeah, for the part of it that's ours, we're good on that. Ultimately, Mid-American owns the rest of that all the way through there. They have, over the last couple of years, they have done some maintenance to that line. That's some improvements.
So the bottom line is we this time don't have our redundancy.
Yeah, we don't have redundant, which,
What's the cost of this part?
this part, well, so if we just end up with the part, you're probably talking a few $1,000s, probably for all that, if we can do some of this in-house, which we're gonna try and do it in-house. But if we end up finding out this cable's damaged further than what we think it is, then you're starting to talk cable, buying cable, which sourcing cable is expensive as well.
It could be more than just that component.
It could possibly be, but we've already done some investigating, some tearing apart and stuff, trying to get ahead just to make sure what pieces and parts are there. But it's not uncommon for us to be on a radio feed every now and then. I don't always let you know because it's usually
What does radio feed mean, Mike?
kind of like a dead end road. There's only one way to come back out.
Okay.
Yep. It only comes from one, you can only get in or out one way. With a loop feed, there's two different directions. And so if, we're being fed from the west and from the east, it did just what it's supposed to. We lost the power from the west, so everything switched over to the east.
I'm asking the question only because there's a part of me that wonders for, a few $1,000s, depending on what that is, in order to not lose our redundancy, if it's worth having something like that, even though.
But the shelf life's only 2 years.
Yeah.
When's the last time this happened?
2 years and it takes 3, and then you've got 3 different sizes. So now we got out of that substation, there would be 9. Well, there's more than that. You're talking 6.
So it'd be more than just one device we'd need.
Yeah, you'd have about 6, 18 every year. Every 2 years we'd have to buy.
The last time we touched it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it'd get expensive. And talking with them, we've talked to Mid-American, we've talked to ITC, Sipco, the big players out there, and none of them carry that stuff on the shelf just because of that same reason.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Good question.
That's it.
Thank you. Blue water?
Yeah, we had a tough Christmas, long day, out there in the cold main break. Had pump issues, had backhoe issues, the guys fought through them, and were able to get that one done. And then in-house, we replaced hydraulic hoses. We were bleeding bad that day, trying to get the backhoe to even work type thing. So we got that taken care of. Not cheap whenever you go into equipment like that. New Year's Day had another break, not as bad, but once again on the holiday calling guys in. And then we had one last week, so not as bad as other places where, 32 main breaks and that kind of stuff in a week. But those 3 breaks, well, 12 has been televised. Hopefully the end of this week, first of next week, we hope to get it in, come back and they'll scrub and clean it. It showed a lot of scale buildup, which is normal in a sense, but there was a lot. So the last time we took well down, it was almost half a dump truck load of scale and whatnot, cleaning out the well, bucketing down, dumping, and to get it good and clean, so we have a better quality of water, obviously. So otherwise, we're staying busy with inside maintenance, and we maybe might even do some concrete pourbacks next week if it gets up to 48. We'll see. I know I'm kind of, we hate to leave the street, any street. We got a couple of them that, they're rocked. And, if you go
How long
out
does
there.
it have to cure before?
Oh, that's the thing, Lori. It's got to stay warm enough for us, even with blankets. We don't want it to crack, but oh boy, I don't know. What the forecast, it's all dependent on the weather. But, you know, if Mike, if you go out to your place, you go down, you know.
I saw there's I found it the first time.
Yeah. Sorry about that, and
The
then.
gravel had washed out of it and.
Oh, and then we got it put back in, if you drive down, there's rock all the way along the curb where, you know, it just didn't settle evenly, so, you know, when they plowed, they shoved it down and then we had to dip, so then we had to bring back more, which is normal, so we're just.
Did the cold weather, do you think that was what caused all the bad?
Well, it just seems this what happens to us, you know, ground shift, age of the main, different things, you know, it's a combination, you know, all that, all those factors.
It's been such a dry summer. I think Chris was the one that said dry
It
summer.
is been dry. I mean, you know, yeah. The hydrant hit that we had earlier, we dug all the way down to the main, you know, put in a new fire hydrant. It was dry and hard digging. So even with the hoe was working it. So you're right, we need some moisture, but.
So with the backhoe, you said that the hydraulic lines went on it?
Yeah, they were leaking.
Cold that did it, do we?
Oh, just, I think wear and tear. You know, when you're running that breaker and you're working it, you're gonna have, you know, it's mechanical. You're gonna have, but I mean, it was leaking pretty bad. But the boys, you know, had to replace and then, you know, gallons and gallons of fluid to get it back up and primed, so. But we got it.
Yeah, do we do regular maintenance on those?
You bet,
checking
you
those?
bet,
So
we
it's
do.
just
It's
one of
just,
those things.
yeah, just broke it. It breaks when you're using it. Just happened to be, you
No other
know.
time, right?
Yeah, cold as can be on Christmas Day, that kind of thing. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Kirk, communications?
Yeah, not a lot. We've moved into winter mode as well, so done putting drops in the ground, but we are still putting temps down. So we'll get those down and wait for spring to get them buried. But ONT updates were completed before Christmas, so we're looking at the next couple weeks to move on to the OLT side of things. And then other than that, the OTN equipment has been coming in quicker than we thought, so that's the equipment that'll push the signal to Walnut and Pella. So hopefully we're looking good on that, and we've actually also got some router equipment in as well already, so not everything, but it's starting to come in the door, which is good to see. So,
Good news.
yeah, exactly. So hopefully, yeah, the timing that they gave us will be a little bit in front of that, so.
Warm weather doesn't give us an opportunity to.
You know, I was looking, I'm kind of with Lou too, if it stays, we'll see what happens on Thursday, if we get rain or snow, and what the temperature does, but if it stays up in the 40s, I might call Robert and see if Alberta wants to come up and take a chance on it next week, so. Especially in those places that get sun, obviously the places in the shade are gonna be still frozen, but yeah, if we've got some of those that have sun, we might give it a chance next week and see what happens, so.
Still digging basements over that new development by us.
So.
Okay, combined electric, water, and communications, Chris?
All right, we have before you the discussion direction regarding our fiscal year budget. So Chris will kind of start in on a high level. You got some information in front of you. We're gonna try to stay at the summary level here, and there will be an opportunity if you guys wanna stay for that study session. We'll kind of get down if you have any specific questions, and we'll go into much detail as you need here, but Chris will kind of give you that comparison on what our fiscal year 23 re-estimate looks like and what our budget for 24 looks like.
Yeah, so this is kind of just a starting point for our budget discussions. We've been kind of working on it the last couple of months, but we've kind of put it into a summary format for you tonight. Over the next couple months, we'll be setting the public hearing date and actually adopting the budget. I think it's the second meeting in February that we do that. So over the next few meetings, we'll just be kind of getting some feedback from you guys. The documents that are in the packet tonight, we kind of just laid it out, maybe for new board members or as a refresher. We kind of summarized what are kind of our major expense categories, I guess, in each department. The revenue pretty much models our financial reports that we do. We have broken out the sale of services, which is, you know, the biggest revenue factor in each of the departments. So we've broken out sales of services for each department and then other revenue there and then the totals And then in the expenses, those categories there. And then the percentages, I will note, next to each of those line items is a percentage of the total expenses. So as you're looking at those, what we're comparing each of those individual line items to is to the total expenses in each department. So just kind of wanted to give you kind of a first glance at our 23 re-estimates and what we're thinking for fiscal year 24. There's a couple of things in there. I think Chris has mentioned the purchase power costs. At this point, we're not 100% sure what those are going to be. He's got a meeting on the 18th with me, and they will confirm that, and then we'll be able to confirm up our numbers here. So that is one of the big things that we still are waiting for. Salaries and benefits, taken a look at those. We've considered our health insurance, which is another thing we'll be having in January, is the preliminary renewal meetings with the city, starting with the health insurance renewals and the risk insurance renewals. We've got a meeting this week to kind of get going on those types of things. So I can kind of just go down one by one and just give you a kind of a brief description of what's in each of those line items if you'd like. Salaries and benefits, that is what it is. Overhead and admin, that includes a lot of our risk insurances, so like work comp, property insurance, liability insurances, those types of things. The shared services line item includes what we pay for city services, which is HR, clerk, and IT services. And then in with that is also the utility services, shared services, and then the IMU admin, which includes the finance, payroll, and accounts payable departments or personnel, which each of the electric, water, and fiber contribute to those expenses, to cover those expenses. The pilot.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So water is 14%. How come they're higher than, say, electric?
For shared services? That's a percentage of the total expenses, Mike.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I actually had, when we get into the study session, we can talk shared services a little more, and I've got something else for you to look at
Okay,
there that
all right,
kind of
that's
looks
fair.
at that.
I was looking at it the wrong way.
specifically. Yeah. Pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes for electric.
Us newbies.
Yeah, for electric and water, we, in lieu of property taxes, we transfer to the city, I think it's 5% of electric sales and 3% of water sales to the city in lieu of property taxes. So that's what that is. And then the franchise fees in the fiber department, help me out with, but that's 5% of the video revenue, correct? Which is similar to like what a MediaCom or something would pay for a franchise fee. So that's what those items are. Distribution, that is kind of distribution system maintenance. That's not like a major like water main replacement or electric line replacement, just kind of operational maintenance type things. You'll probably notice in the fiber, we do not have anything budgeted there at this time. And the reason for that is because the fiber distribution system is so new. Over the next couple of years, we will start putting some dollars in there for distribution maintenance. At this point, we don't really have any ongoing maintenance with the system that is fairly new. So operations, again, the big line item there kind of is in the electric. That includes our purchase power expenses. Water and fiber. Water would be like plant type things, chemicals and that sort of thing to run the plant. In Kurtz, that includes kind of our maintenance contracts and our service contracts with some of the video providers. Is that correct, Kurt?
Correct.
Yeah. Maintenance and repair, that includes just kind of O&M. That includes our vehicles, maintenance and repair items. That's what's in that category there. Our debt service, that's kind of self-explanatory. And then our transfers to capital that the monies that we transfer from the department O&M budgets that go to fund the capital projects. So that
Why does electric not have anything for that? 23.
And then 2.5 million for 24.
we just added that in 24, correct?
Yeah, electric's one of the few places that, because of our capacity payments and a couple other that we fund directly.
To fund it from operations.
So we don't have a operational fund, for this year. For next year, we put $2.5 million in there, and that was more of a, for convenience, a balancing of our fund balance. We're getting kind of high on the operational ones and move that down the line to capital, more appropriate level on capital. So, in the past, maybe it kind of drifted. That's just a one-time reallocation to that appropriate levels.
And then on the backside of this, I did just, again, provide the capital budget that we did back in December. And that should then, show you the transfers to capital, those projects that are being funded. So again, it's just kind of a starting point. We'll be setting the public hearing, I think that is 23rd, January 23rd, and then we'll actually hold the public hearing and adopt the budget the second meeting in February. So we've got some time to button these things down, and questions I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can address some of those in this meeting.
So when you say this is a good starting point, we release it on the 23rd? You have plenty of time?
Yes, yes.
So you kind of got an estimate on buttoning it up and everything and good to go?
Yep, all the department heads and I, we've been meeting actually even before the holidays. We've got a good start on it this year, I feel, and we've been tweaking some numbers already, and so we feel like we're in a pretty good spot, just waiting on some of those.
Yeah, we have a couple of the conversations about an insurance and with the city to kind of button up.
Probably not prepared to do this tonight, so I'm not expecting it, but I think it'd be good if we could have a conversation for each of the utilities as to what the surplus or deficit is and more strategically long-term. You know, does that make sense for what we're headed, towards down the road? So like, just taking water as an example, you're showing a $269, that's actually this year. Next year, you're showing a it's small, $12,000 deficit there. Is that to do some of the things that we want to do in the future in terms of repairing water mains and that, is that going to get us to that point? Not a conversation I'm expecting to have tonight, but I think we need to have that sometime.
Other questions, conversations? As Chris mentioned, we are going to do a study session immediately following, so we can get into any additional comments?
No, I think the staff's done a great job getting the budget together. We're, obviously, there's a couple of loose ends here and there. One of those coming up, next week will be the meeting where, we've got a pretty good feeling about where that's gonna go and what that's gonna take, but, nothing's official until it's official, and we're waiting on that final vote for rates, for the following year. And with that and a couple other chunks of information, we'll have this, ready to go and ready to talk with some of those more specifics about actual fund balances and items like that.
Move on. Combined electric other communications informational items, anything additional?
Nope, other than the travel for next week, items set forth here, don't have anything specific for tonight.
I'm kind of jumping backwards here, but related to the shared services, you've been meeting with Ben, right, on that, and are we moving in the direction of a 2080 agreement for that, or what's the status?
I think in general, we're moving away from the 2080 philosophy. I mean, this is internal stuff. They are, a couple other items have been removed out of consideration. clerk and items like that as we're cleaning those up. I think we're in good shape with HR and for IT. The only thing that really we will delve into a little bit further here in the discussion is the utility services discussion that we don't have panned out yet. But
What are the pros and cons, Chris, of a 2080?
the 2080 is a, intergovernmental agreement. I guess the pros would be a formal declaration of everything. It's registered, it's public. Probably wasn't ever needed between two, sister organizations. We typically are, we are part of the city. Rather than filing that and making it formal, we'll just kind of have written agreements or written documents of, our expectations and levels. Lawyers don't probably need to get involved. This is, we're working together, we're working with the city. Both Ben and I feel like in a lot of these cases, the gentleman's agreement is gonna suffice for our needs.
That's kind of scary.
I just to add a caution there. I do think, even if we don't do a 2080 agreement, I think there needs to be something written down, something documented.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, I guess I should caveat that, just a written agreement that, we're both acknowledging the who's and what's and whys and how much, not a registered document with the state.
And will that address how changes might occur in the future? Like if the city were to decide to do something different, or we decide to do something different, how do we notify and how do we work through those details with the other party?
That's in the draft agreement.
Other business, we have our selection of officers for 23. So I sent a note to the board suggesting a proposal of Deb and I continuing in the roles that we're in. Open to input or feedback, or if somebody else would like to take those roles on. Otherwise, we
Make a motion that we continue with the same officers.
Second.
Let's step on each other on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the slate of officers stands.
And I would say, very honestly, and you could speak to it also, I think having sat there, I think doing a 2-year stint is a good thing.
Actually, I feel like now I just have my feet up.
Yeah. You're kind of getting some stuff figured out and all of a sudden, yeah. So I don't know that that's a bad
proposal that
thing.
we think about. Maybe we put it as a request.
That's really been the practice, honestly. As long as I've been on the board, and my time been on the board, it's generally been a 2-year stint for everybody.
It's typically in a 5-year or 6-year term. I spend 2 years doing it anyway. So it all makes sense for it to be. Anyway, we're there. It's approved.
Your turn will come, Don.
We've already warned him. He got the lecture the other night at the table. Not from us.
The lecture, holy smokes.
Stephanie was quizzing him.
It's good to go.
Anything else before we adjourn? If not, I'll take a first and second motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will have our study session for budget, so those of you that have to stay, you have to do. Chris Longer's gonna walk us through kind of that conversation.
So this kind of is, and I may turn this over to Chris to talk about the methodology that's down below. But you'll see at the top is the fiscal year '24, and then the '23 reestimate for the shared services. So the way we have kind of arrived at these in the past, kind of been, well, for like the city services, which is HR, IT, and then the clerk and finance, it's kind of based on time allocation and the time that those folks spend doing IMU.
Justin, you could come around here and sit with us.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, I should have printed more copies. And so every year we, Andy and I kind of talk, and Jackie, and we kind of exchange budgets, and it's a percentage of those budgets based on hours that are allocated to doing IMU functions. So Jackie, doing our meetings, minutes, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how we've come to those in the past. For fiscal year '24, those are changing a little bit. We still have some discussions. I think we're meeting with Ben again tomorrow to kind of nail down some of those allocations for the city services. For the utility services and the IMU admin, again, utility services is Alicia and her crew that does the billing and the customer service. And then the IMU admin is Chris, myself, and Karen that does like the accounts payable and the payroll. So those are the two IMU shared services, I guess I should say, that are funded by the other IMU departments, and then the utility services, the other IMU departments, and then the city. So in the past, we've had the 28-year agreement that we've revisited and revisited. So I think Chris has come up with maybe another methodology here, and I'll kind of turn that over to you, Chris, to kind of talk about the information at the bottom.
Okay, perfect. So, I think probably just to start focus on the, 23 reestimate of the utility services, the US. You can see across the board, the funding levels that, each of the departments and then the city, contribute towards that, collective group. Electric at 292, water at 235, fibers at 108, and the cities at, 95. Those amounts are derived, I think, over a kind of for a different purpose, and time has, evolved to make those, that original 17% maybe less applicable than it has previously.
When you say 17%, is that the 95?
Yeah, that's the 95. The funding level that the city had, it was 17% of particular expenses. Where I think it's most obvious that that's slanted is, water funding at 235 and the city, which is the sewer, stormwater, and recycling, funding comes in at 95. Water does have at $2.5 million, substantially less revenue dollars than necessarily the city sewer that's coming in at 4%, but are, paying a multiple of that current level. So where I've been working with, or what Ben and I have been discussing, is various methodologies maybe to reallocate that in a way that I think is a little more fair and reflects both the administrative burden as well as the wherewithal to pay. And so this last section down here is some of the thought process that went into this. Obviously with the city sewers, fiber, sewer, stormwater, water, electric, and recycling, that first column you see was their 2022 collections year to date. So it's given a full cycle. And the next column is the share of collections. So fiber being 15, sewer being 15, stormwater, those various percentage. That's what those percentage of the dollars in that column before. The next item is customer count, and that customer count is, you know, out of reports as of October. So it does vary a little bit, from month to month, but over time, you know, that's the approximate average. The next column there, of course, is the percentage that each one of those services has of the customer count. The next columns, the 50-50, 60-40, 66-33, 70-30, and 75-25, those are a weighted average of the share of collections as well as the customer account. And I think the driver behind those, you know, I think it's certainly certainly good to recognize that there's a component of wherewithal to pay. You know, we see electric does have the highest level of revenues and therefore has the, you know, ability to pay a little more. But the other driver is customer count, and that for our utility services, you know, the more customers you have, the more likely you'll get a call, the larger your share of postage, the, you know, items like those.
Do we have, I know you were tracking calls, what they were for and what they're coming in for. Do we have a percentage of what those, have we gotten to that point yet? Just out of curiosity, I realize customers are gonna call in and a higher customer base may mean more. That doesn't always mean it'll happen. If they aren't getting calls, they aren't getting calls.
Yeah, and I think what happened there, and that was my original thought, was that's gonna give us lots of valuable information out of there. But after we looked at those logs, you know, the vast majority of the calls really can't be attributed to the, you know, 90 and 95% of the calls. You know, most people calling are calling to pay. Most people are calling are saying, I'm behind on my bill, what are my options? And that's, you know, really can't be attributed to any one single service. We tried to cover that with customer count. Just the larger number of customers, the more likely you are to generate the call. That call log really didn't, I guess it really provided how equal over the year that a lot of those calls get distributed. Now, certainly there are calls that you could probably point to in hindsight, you know, when it's August and somebody calls about, hey, I'm curious on why my bill is this. The answer more likely in August than, you know, in February is you probably got, you know, electric usage from your air conditioner where, you know, that call that happens in May probably is driven towards water. But those really, you know, while they existed, they didn't represent the majority of the calls. And so really what that kind of showed, those customer service folks are working with the group. You know, that there was no smoking gun per se, that, you know, when people had a question about their payment options or when it's due or late fees, those really are kind of divided across, touching a little bit on all of the areas. Rather than, you know, a spike of calls in one particular month. You know, for instance, I think last year we had Warren County Water had a boil order, generated a notable amount of extra calls, but who would you attribute that to? It wasn't necessarily because it was a problem with our water service. It was a general customer service, and where, you know, that was a notable spike, but you'd have to, I mean, you can't point that to any one service.
At this point, with that kind of level of explanation, it feels like really the payment is toward the billing aspect. And so they're taking part in a shared billing service as much as they are a customer support base.
How rounded are these customer counts?
I'm
guessing we don't have 7,000 electric customers.
No, they were to the 25.
Okay. And how do we get 1,000 more electric customers and water customers?
Those are electric meters, one
Double meters. Well, like the trailer park, there's 2 water meters that feed the trailer park, and there's 150 electric meters inside the park for each individual trailer. One
So
water.
they don't get
meter.
individual water bills.
Don't get individual water bills. Same way with the park.
Really? Like a shop. All right.
And I don't have power and I have water. I mean, I don't have electric and I just
Right.
I mean,
So I
it's not-
assumed,
it's not a
I
guarantee.
assumed water would be higher because you have a bigger territory.
But like say apartments, same way, one
Okay,
big
that's
water
fine.
meter, an apartment, 12 electric.
So, yeah, those, and of course, those are, they're not a perfect science, in July, maybe, you get a lot of people moving, or I gave Lori the instance of when somebody moves in and out of an apartment, that water service or that electric service might be in 3 customers' names in that month, where you got a apartment dweller that leaves, it goes back into the landlord's name for a time, and then it goes back into the, a new tenant's name. And so there, there's one address, one meter, but it ends up showing up on 3 people's bills. And that's, obviously with it changing hands over 3 people, that, I do think it's fair to have, you're more likely to generate the calls as you exit and enter, and the landlords, you're referring to that. So even though those do change by move-ins and move-outs, that does represent, I think we used October's, an average October number of the beginning and ending amounts rounded to the 25.
The day, it was probably a good month to use because people are back from school, and so people tend to be more settled by that time in the fall. People were moving. It's a town, so.
Chris, explain administrative burden?
So I'll finish up the,
If you guys spoke about that, I thought maybe
yeah.
I missed it. Never mind.
So here's where a little bit of judgment on what weighting the wherewithal to pay or the dollar revenues should be attributed, and customer count the other one. I've kind of focused in on 6633 as what I think is a good representative, fair distribution. I think, I'm certainly, if you guys have input that you feel strongly upwards or downwards, you can see how, for the most part, across fiber, it changes between 13.02 and 14.09. A relatively tight grouping. With electric, it varies a little more, just because of the dollars involved. But for most of the other services, it revolves around, there is some consistency, and if you went to one extreme or the other, it doesn't vary terribly much. So I've kind of, justified or thought fair, this 66.33% share. But certainly with input, I'd hear onto everything else. So that moves down the line.
Can you explain what the 66.33 is? I'm just doing the math and
So,
percentages, so I was just kind of curious. It's not working in my head.
so if you take, we'll take fiber for instance, and you weight 15.17%, that's the share of collections. If you weight that by 66% and then weight the customer count by 33%, the weighted average of those 2 amounts is the 13.7%. So
Okay, all right. Nope, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, he's waiting all of that.
I was trying to think that 33% was city, 66% was us. Gotcha.
yeah, no, of those two factors that I've derived, certainly, Adam, I think we talked, if you have any other input into a particular data point, we were, struggled to kind of make the end all be all perfect set of data points where, that would take a lot of the decision out of some of these numbers. That's where I arrived, but if you got another factor that you'd like to consider, I'm all ears for that, and that goes for everyone.
This makes sense to me, and as long as you and Ben are in agreement on the 6633, seems reasonable.
We're discussing that. We haven't, and so down to that administrative burden, Mike, your question. So as we've gone through and kind of looked at the various different ways you can look at that, I selected the 6633 and then applied that against, the total revenues. And so what that 2% represents is, if, for instance, I'll pick on fiber again, their burden, the 13.7% of the $617,000 administrative charge, or $639,000 administrative charge would be $87,000, and that $87,000 is 2% of the $4.17 million. There's actually some more detail behind there that must have got
It's
sentence
just
around
it's
in.
a percentage of sales.
Yeah, it's that cost as a percentage of sales.
That's just to get a rough idea of how much of their sales is going towards this administrative.
Precisely.
And it gives us something that we can back to and say, we need to adjust. Are there assumptions that have changed? How do we think about it? Rather than having this agreement, disagreement kind of waging over data.
Chris,
So-
where's the 600,000 figure you were making reference to? This right here?
So I was thinking I got this figured out, Chris, you can correct me here, but if you add up the 87,576 is in the top there, the 87 under fiber.
Correct.
And then for the city, if you add the sewer, stormwater, and the recycling together, that's the 187,965. So the administrative burden isn't part of the calculation, you're just calculating that number to get a rough idea.
Just as a frame of reference, we're calculating that to get an idea. One of the proposals that I think Ben and I were entertaining was, rather than going into the detail and looking at the budgets, every year, could we find a fair and equitable administrative charge? If we could settle on that, rather than going back and, trying to do this data exchange for purposes of expediency. We could say, it's gonna be 2.5% of sales. We would, as we're doing the transfer, do a 2.5% haircut and transfer that. It has both a built-in inflationary aspect as time goes on.
And we
Rates need to
do
go
our
up.
due diligence to make sure that the things in that fund are the things that they use.
And I would much rather have it based on concrete data and some formula that we follow than just a general agreement, in my opinion, though.
We've talked about that, having kind of a clearer idea of how you got to that percentage and testing your assumptions.
That's just kind of a little, where we're at in the process. We're certainly not ready to sign any agreements, but that was some of the change in methodology. It does represent a pretty significant departure from prior years, but I do think that there is a good measure of fairness and equitability in the distribution, and certainly a lot of reason to take a look at this, given that the age of that prior structure and what has changed since it was really derived starting in 2017.
So, dumb question. I don't see what we were paying before, so how do we end up in the green, in the red, compared to how we did last year? I guess in the years before, are we better off? City better off?
It's actually on there. So the middle section is the year that we're in now. So if you,
For the FY re-estimate?
yeah, if you look at that utility services line compared to the fiscal 24 up above, that's what the variance is.
Okay, all right.
A little bit of savings on electric, quite a bit of savings on water, a little bit of savings on fiber, and then there's a jump in the city, which to me makes some sense because of the higher amount of volume that we're billing
Okay,
that hasn't been reflected in that amount.
all right, no, that answers my question, perfect, thank you.
So that's that 732 figure.
Yeah, that's this year, the year that we're in. Is that budget, or that's reestimate?
That's the re-estimate.
And so we're anticipating that our 24 budget is gonna be less than.
It's going down to 639.
This is going up with a lot of the utility services where the dollars for the conference room stuff. We got the conference room equipment and
Current year?
yeah, in the current year. And so, in addition to, our overall costs are going down, some, not nearly as dramatic as that would show, but our costs are going down a little bit. But this is really higher than where we entered, modified by those improvements to the customer service facility. But that, of course, that burden didn't get borne by the city. That 95 was held. The rest of that burden got shifted over to the other departments. But that is one time, primarily one time, 1 year stuff. So generally that's decreasing, but not as much as this might show.
We haven't had the insurance conversation.
Yep.
There could be some fluctuation that we see, not probably tremendous, but we may see different numbers on the 23rd when we come back.
Yeah, we've got some expectations. I mean, we are including a property tax increase in there. We do have some expectations of what health insurance is gonna look like, but if they do, those two items, for instance, if those do depart from our expectations, we'll either have an increase or decrease based upon that.
I think it'd be good if you could share some of the assumptions that went into this, like on the revenue. Were you assuming a rate increase at some point during the year or leaving flat? On the expense side, what are you assuming for the health insurance increase, for property and casualty insurance and compensation increases? So that we're,
Kind of like we do with our other financials, just maybe a notes page at the back to say, these are some of the items that played into it.
Yeah, we
Is that
certainly
what
can
you're
lay those out.
referring to?
Generally, as you might expect, our increases for labor are pretty well defined. Water, we did have a big year-over-year increase, but we had a lot of license upgrades. That was kind of a highlight in, the water. Electric, because of the tenure of most of our staff and where they are in the union agreements, we didn't have much more than a 3% increase in that, and that represents basically the union contract. I think it was 3.3%, where we had one person in addition to that's going up a step, and generally a 3% increase down the line. I mean, we still are seeing in water chemical increases. Construction costs remain inflated. But the good news is across the board, our administrative costs are going down. So where we can control that, we are, and where unfortunately we have to, I think I paid good attention to the markets and what it's going to take to operate next year. But we can get that a little more detail, send that out, and get into specifics with that.
Questions on any of the other budget pieces that Chris no longer spoke to tonight?
I've got one. And related to the pilot franchise fees, you said part of that is us in lieu of paying property taxes. This is just gonna be my ignorance being new. What all would be included in property taxes that we would pay? Like, does it, where our underground lines are and all that stuff as well, or is it just the buildings that we own? I'm just kinda curious, like, what percentage of this?
And it's property taxes as well as franchise fees. The property taxes, there certainly are some easement rights that we would have to pay for. But as a part of the city, pilots are there because you can't tax yourself, you can't tax your own entity, and from that revenue perspective, we are part of the city, and so we can't assess franchise fees upon ourselves or property taxes on ourselves.
So is your question, are the property taxes for the buildings and property that we own? Or those easements that you also talked about? Or both?
Yeah, and I'm just kinda curious, I mean, we're running about $1 million right there. Do we have $1 million worth of property tax that we would pay?
The vast
Are we in
majority.
better shape paying the city a property tax?
No, the vast majority of that there is a replacement for a franchise fee.
Okay.
And so,
Or a sales tax, right?
yeah, or a sales tax. With electric, it would be franchise fee, water, it would be
You can almost think of it as a 5% sales tax on electric and
But we
3%
pay sales tax on the fiber side, right?
yeah, on video, we pay a sales
for video?
tax, but there's also a franchise fee assessed on there as well. So on video, we pay for.
Adam, would you repeat what you just said?
I think of it more as a sales tax, that there, for electric, there's a 5% sales tax that we pay to the city. For water, it's a 3% sales tax, and that's derived from, that's historical, when IMU was probably set up, I assume.
Yeah, that, it's a city ordinance, city council has decided that's what the kind of internal, transfer would
And
be.
that's very common, other
Okay.
utilities are doing the same thing, right?
No, that works. I was just trying to think through are we better off just paying a property tax then? But with all the additional, that makes sense. Thank you.
The only thing I would add here, Dom, is, Chris can can go into a lot more detail, more on an account-by-account basis. And if you really want to get an understanding of what's driving some of the lines that she has summarized, that'd be something for you and Chris to potentially spend some time going through.
Okay.
And we've done that in a meeting in the past. It gets kind of tedious, and I appreciate the approach we're taking this year, but something, and a piece of advice for you.
Nope, that works great. That one was just, I put a note down.
Any other accounts or groupings you'd like to dig into?
Where are we at? So looking at this, and I'm seeing, debt service. So it might be nice just to get an idea also of what we have outstanding as far as debt for each one of the utilities. For instance, I thought the water utility was debt-free.
Yeah, we just got that bond that, we're winning and, with, the city on that project there down Buxton and Boston now. So we're
Part of that.
We have
Yeah.
2 years left.
2 years,
This
yeah.
year and
We
next
did
year.
pay off that 154.
We did
The internal.
Yeah, we paid off the internal one, but this is the last one with
asked
the
the
city that we're refunding. And that is pretty easy. Since we started issuing, accrual-based financial statements, that number is right in our audit report. And so we can either give it that in some level of details, or we can just kind of point you to the.
Reference the
right
audit.
page and,
I never received a copy of the audit.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody,
I emailed out the
I
electronic.
thought she did as well.
I can send,
I think you and I got a
Yeah, I was gonna
preview,
say, I
but
thought it
think
was
when
just
she
you
sent
two
to
got it.
all, you didn't get it either?
I think you two only got it.
that was my
That
understanding.
was, 2 meetings ago or 1 meeting ago.
I thought Chris followed up with by sending it to everybody, and that was when we were having all those email issues, so maybe.
Okay. So Mike, you've not seen it, and Dom, you've not seen it? Okay.
The only thing I've seen was the summary from Denman.
Would you just mind sending to the whole board again, just so we have record of it?
You're getting your from the IMU.
I am now, yeah. Everything seems to be working fine.
But that was kind of in that same time frame.
I'll send it.
As far as I know, I'm getting them. I guess I wouldn't know if I wasn't.
One more thing, just on the debt service, since you brought it up, and it made me think about it. We had talked about the additional funds that were not being used for the fiber line, and whether or not we'd be able to get back any of that. Did we find out an answer on that?
We haven't yet. We've got a call Thursday, find that out.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
That's a pretty short list. I actually thought you'd have more.
Just as we were going through, things popped in my head, but I think,
So this was kind of a stab at a study session for this information. Do you have any recommendations on how we would improve this conversation or change it to be more of what you thought it might be?
The only thing I would add is just what I said before about kind of tying it into our strategic plan, and where is what we're budgeting here gonna get us from a fund balance standpoint? But for a study session like this, we need to just look at the numbers and ask questions like been asked.
Anything else this evening? Do a vote in all session. Thanks everybody for sticking around a little bit longer.
One more minute.